everybody, and welcome. Good morning. Thank you so much for getting up on a Friday morning, a cold Friday morning, and coming out here to join us.
Only for you.
I'm Sherry Hakimi. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Perth.org, and it is my distinct pleasure to be able to welcome you to this wonderful and very special UNCSW side event in partnership with Veronica Beard. Thank you so much to the Veronica Beard team. I don't see everybody here right now, but Lila, Sasha, Allison, the people at Veronica Beard could not be more generous, and we're so grateful for their support of our mission and our work, and we're thrilled that this is the inaugural of our speaker series in partnership with them. So jumping right in to this fireside, I want to start us off with a fairly simple but somehow still BHAG of an idea. BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. We all deserve safety to thrive. We all deserve safety to thrive, online and offline. And yet, somehow, that still isn't our reality. And at Perth, this isn't just something that we have, it's not a pretty set of words on our homepage, though it is. It's what drives our work. It's the vision behind everything that we do. And we want to make sure that people have the safety to be able to live their best life. They deserve that. And we want to be able to support them, give them the resources to be able to do that. Because it's not revelatory to say that our world is increasingly online. It's our relationships, our work, our identities, our civic participation. So much of it now lives in digital spaces. And unfortunately, a lot of those digital spaces have now become sites of potential harm, like cyberbullying, image-based abuse, doxing, deepfakes, violent threats. And that's not fair, it's not right, and we need to do better. So that safety to thrive, that work, brings us to our guest here today, who is leading so much of this important work. Nabiha Syed has spent her career asking a simple but essential question. Does technology uplift human agency, or does it stifle it? She's asked this question as a First Amendment lawyer. She's asked it as the CEO of The Markup, an investigative newsroom which, among other things, brought tech accountability to the halls of Congress. And today, she asks that question every day as the executive director of the Mozilla Foundation, which is the most trusted voice and advocate for a safer, trustworthy, open, human-centered internet. She sits on multiple boards, including the Scott Trust and many more. And she also sits on the World Economic Forum's AI Governance Alliance. So in short, she is essentially the person that we want to have in this seat right now having this conversation. So thank you so much for being here with us, Nabiha.
It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here with all of you. So thank you. The work that you do is, it is the question of our time. So I really, really appreciate the chance to chat with you about it.
Thank you so much. So the three themes of our fireside today are digital rights, AI governance, and what we can all do to create online safety and safety to thrive for all. So jumping right in this world where AI is increasingly embedded in everything and it is shaping what we see, what we believe, it's making decisions about us and for us. In this world today, what does it actually mean to have digital rights? What does that actually mean?
Ooh, it's a good question.
Starting off easy.
I love it. I love it. So digital rights for so long were in the earlier version of the internet, pre-AI, was really thought of as freedom. Do you have the freedom to connect? Do you have the freedom to read? Do you have freedom to engage? And then privacy, right? And a lot of the questions would exist at that sort of tension of like, where does your freedom go? How far does it go? How does it intersect with other people's privacy? Fine. And so that was sort of the core tension in a lot of work, and there's a lot of standards around ensuring freedom, standards around ensuring privacy. But I actually think that digital rights now has a very different dimension about agency and participation. It's not, and so there's a thin way of thinking about freedom, which is like, what do I get to do? Like, what do I get to see? What's my right to make this image of another person? And there's a much richer understanding of freedom of what human agency is this curtailing in someone else? What is it curtailing of my own? This is a much richer frame of freedom that requires us to have a sort of different conversation around rights that's oriented around participation, inclusion, thinking about deep participation and research and informed structures. And I just think we live in a time where the other distinction between old internet and the sort of digitally connected universe we're in now is that we live in a time of hyper-centralization and a few monopolies making a lot of choices about what that shape of space should look like. The old internet was, for better or worse, wild before it sort of started to centralize in that way. And what that wildness meant was that there's room for experimentation, right? And so there's room to experiment with different ideas of freedom and different approaches to privacy. That's the water Mozilla came from, right? And we advocate for open source, not just for it to be open, because open source means that people have the freedom to design the spaces that work for them, that have participation for their own communities. That's not the ecosystem we're in now, until we all do something to change that, which I'm excited to chat with you about.
Thank you. Yeah, Mozilla is really leading the way on that work.
We're trying, but it's going to be an ensemble cast situation.
Absolutely. This is not something that any one of us can do. And last year I was lucky enough to see you present at the Aspen Digital Shared Futures Forum, where you made a very compelling presentation on Mozilla's Common Voice project, where you made the point that AI is only as inclusive as the data that it's built with. And right now, that data speaks in very few languages, unfortunately. So now you've led the development of the world's largest crowdsourced speech data set, and you've also set the example, a concrete example, of what community-led public interest AI looks like. So for you, as an expert in this space, what does AI governance look like, and how could the Common Voice project blueprint be implemented more broadly, perhaps?
Oh, thank you for that question. It was Shared Futures. That was it was a fun event. To share a little bit more about Common Voice, just to illustrate sort of the philosophy behind how I think we should be building in this time, because I think for us to build the power for the world that we need, we both need to fight against and identify the problems that we see, which you do incredibly. We also need to be building what we actually want at the same time, because every problem you articulate is also a space for a solution. And so if we think of Mozilla's role as like, what are the tools, what are the building blocks that we can equip people with to build what we actually want? Because the digital world that we're in, for many of us, is not the world that I want to be in. So Common Voice was rooted in a very simple observation. How many people in here speak a different language besides English? Okay. I know. I was like, all right, okay. Love that. So English was actually my second language. I spoke Urdu first, and I can sense now that I think differently in these different languages, right? And so if you think about innovation as a goal, like I want people to have the freedom to create and have agency to build the world they want to live in, online and offline. I want them to be able to do that fully, not just oriented and guided by the concepts available in a single language, which is English, right? And so we had this insight at Mozilla, predating me, right? I can't take credit for it, that the market will start to resource Mandarin data sets and Spanish data sets and French data sets. But it wasn't going to do Sindhi or Punjabi or Catalan or Flemish. It wasn't going to do that. So we could step up and say, let us, with people, crowdsource these really robust data sets in a variety of different low resource languages. We will invest in it to create that, to entrust people to build whatever they want to with it. We're not telling you what to build. You build for yourself, but we're going to do the work to give you the building block. And we have continued to invest in it. One of the core initiatives when I started almost 2 years ago now was to really amplify that investment. And now we're looking beyond language, right? What are the data sets? You know, so much of the data sets that are the training data for AI that we see are scraped from the bowels of the internet. From Reddit threads that wouldn't see me as a human being, from corners of blogs that have thoughts that I do not believe represent the majority of people on the world.
Humanity, really.
Yeah, like, because it just happens to be the reflection of the blog stylings of people who were extremely online for the last 2 decades, and that is not representative of the whole world. So how do we invest in data sets that actually show women as leaders?
Yeah.
That show people from all countries as innovators, not just people who happen to look like Sam Altman and Elon Musk.
Right.
How do we invest in those data sets that are the architecture of what we see at the very end when we query Claude or ChatGPT something? And this has huge implications as we see AI being used for medical interventions, for algorithmic decision making about who gets benefits, about what business should be invested in and what shouldn't be. And so for us, we think that data set layer, it's unglamorous, but it is like the necessary work that helps shape participation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you're actually bringing voice into it, not just typing, not just the written aspect of it, but also the language, like the spoken language.
It's so beautiful to hear people's relationships with their own language. We had a guest speaker come into Mozilla who had learned that there were, only a few hours in the Sindhi data set. And he was like, I'm going to build out the data set. And we have these guidelines of how to build it out that say, please make sure that you have generational representation and gender representation. And regional representation. And we have all kinds of guidelines about how to do that. And just hearing his quest of like, I went out to find, young adults and to hear their slang and their language, and also my grandparents and great-grandparents, and reflect their language. Yeah. And when you crowdsource for something like that, especially with voice, and using that as a place to start, people approach it with such love and honor and care and stewardship for their culture. That's the mindset we need for the internet we're building, right? Not just, will it make me money quickly?
Yeah, unfortunately. I'm listening to Empire of AI right now, and it is terrifying.
It's such a good book, though. If you have not listened or read it, Empire of AI by Karen Howe, last name H-A-O. It's incredible because it is just this look at how it all works, who are the players. Yeah. It's not that many people, guys.
It's a few.
It's a few. We can do this. Like, we can build something that is different. It is possible. They have managed to do it in what, a couple decades?
Yeah.
We can spend a couple decades building something better. It is possible.
I feel like we've already begun.
You've been doing the work.
Which, on that note, a lot of Perth.org's members are the people who disproportionately face online violence. So academics, activists, journalists, elected officials, students, the highly visible and then the highly vulnerable. And what we've tried to do at Perth is give them an independent, secure place to be able to report what they're experiencing and immediately receive personalized resources and support so that they can stay safe. And in the process, they can also be meaningfully contributing to the formulation and advocacy of evidence-based solutions by virtue of reporting what's happening to them. That goes into an anonymized data set that we're building, which is unique because we take all sorts of threats from all kinds of people all around the world across all of social media. And that's not a data set that anybody else has. And data is power today. And we want to be able to take some of that back and to be able to actually push solutions, not just, temporary band-aids for people. So given that a lot of the online threats and harms today are, with the advent of AI, being significantly sped up, increase. With the advent of AI, we're seeing online threats and harms increase in speed, scale, scope, and sophistication. So agentic harassment, coordinated bot campaigns, very scary targeted doxing. There's a lot that can go wrong here. And in your opinion, what responsibilities do the AI developers and platforms have to avoid this? And what accountability mechanisms would actually work?
Actually work is a juicy one on what time horizon. So AI developers cannot be allowed to treat safety as a nice perk, which they currently do, right? Safety is secondary. Safety is, the trust and safety team is a team you can cut, which is what we are seeing in all of these developers, right? We are seeing trust and safety teams being quietly dismantled and positioned as a friction for the spread and dominance of these technologies. That's not an acceptable trade-off. It just isn't an acceptable trade-off. And I would posit that it is actually the consensus of most people that that is not an acceptable trade-off. And yet, that position, that unified position that like women do not believe that's acceptable, many parents do not believe that's acceptable, many groups of people do not believe it's acceptable, we're not speaking in a single voice around it. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of lawmakers, and not just in the United States, across the world, we're like, well, we have extreme FOMO about missing out on the AI boom. And we're told that if we believe in safety, we're going to miss out on the AI boom. So
we'll stifle innovation.
Yeah, we'll stifle innovation. So I guess we can't do that right now. We'll do safety later.
Because that's how that works.
That's how that works. And I think there is a really interesting, insufficiently tapped lever of power, which is us saying no. Actually, and I was actually just talking with a group of nonprofits yesterday. Like, before you decide to integrate AI tool of your choosing, and I would say this for our own things as well, is it in your vendor security questionnaire to say, do you have trust and safety? You ask about cybersecurity, you ask about all these things. Is it in there? Is it just part of the checklist? Because if the person who's doing sales says, oh, they don't want to sign on until we have trust and safety, that's sending a signal back in, right? And so I think playing both that inside game, right, which is slower but has a groundswell, as well as that outside game of being very loud, of doing the research, of presenting together, that's very important.
Absolutely.
We were chatting a little bit about this, but how many folks know who Susan Baker is? So she's considered the mother, I guess there's multiple Susan Bakers, but she's considered the mother of safety prevention. She was a professor at Johns Hopkins who did all of the research around seatbelts and infant safety seats. And she meticulously documented like what happened to children in car crashes who were not in safety seats and those who were. And she just was out there doing the research, so scientifically backed, doing the power building work of the advocacy, building up the pressure to say, we need to mandate car seats. We need to not just have cars that happen to have seatbelts that you wear or not, but actually mandate that you have to wear your seatbelt. It takes time to do that, right? That's like, it is an ensemble cast situation, but I think the pieces of demanding it before we implement anything, sending that signal of like, this innovation's not happening unless you care about it, and then sending the signal to lawmakers to say, the innovation isn't going to happen because we will resist it. Unless you implement this, and telling them how and giving them the stories that you collect, I think that's critical for change to happen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it's not just laws that are going to save us, because I grew up in New Hampshire, the live for your or die state, and it was really live for your die. So seatbelts were not mandated.
Yeah.
It was not mandatory. So it's a norm for sure, and a law. It has to be, it's both and.
Yeah. And that's where also like the shaming is important when we see things. When someone posts a, unflattering deep fake of a women candidate, to be like, hey, are you okay? Like, what's going on? Like, are you a weirdo? Why are you doing this, right? There's like the interpersonal shaming norm. There's the corporate, like, I shan't unless you do this. I'm going to speak to the authorities and pressure. It is like across the stack pressure. And I understand why it doesn't happen in a lot of spaces, because there is like shame and fear and concern about being like, this is a thing that's happening to me, right? And so building the power amongst one another to destigmatize and share and be open is a really important part of this. And I don't want to gloss over that, because it really does matter, but it is necessary for us to make the overall change we need.
Yeah, that's where our agency comes in large part. And with that, I'd love to turn it over to you for Q&A. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah,
I
Megan.
have a question about where, a lot of this does involve the government, the regulation. And where do you see like lawsuits helping? I mean, you've got this big lawsuit against Meta from the parents, their children, right, on Instagram and all of that. Like, that's a kind of shaming, and like, will that matter? Like, these companies lose, is there enough money they could lose to make them actually implement it because it's the right thing to do? Like, You know?
It's a great question. And like as a lawyer and as a person whose journalism in the past helped spark a lot of class action lawsuits, I think we had 29 at last count, necessary but insufficient lever of change, right? Because what we see, unfortunately, is with even a lot of the really big class actions, the remedies at the end are ultimately not proportionally a huge sum of money to these companies, right? So, you'll have these historic fines in the EU against Meta, but for Meta, it's like a day's rounding error. So they don't like it, and they'll spend quite a lot of money fighting it. But at the end of the day, it's not destroying the business. But that doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile to do as a part of this larger whole of field strategy, which is shifting the norms. And we see that norm shift around AI happening right now, right? Where people are like, it's a set of technologies that you think will destabilize our entire economy, put people out of work, maybe like precipitate end times, but we're just doing it anyway.
Yeah.
We're just like, what? And so to create the space to talk about that and to have some people in the field say, and by the way, we're going to file those lawsuits to show that we don't like it. It's like as much of a norm signal as it is exacting costs. But what we also need to see is more courage in the awards when we find that something is not right? Like, I don't know, we could see even more historic fines, right? And to really wrap our minds around the fact that it's just a few companies with a lot of power and a lot of capital, any remedy has to be commensurate with the power that they have. And we haven't quite seen that in those regulatory enforcements.
Great question. Ariba?
Thank you so much for gifting us this of a Friday morning. So I love your point around talking about the seatbelt, and immediately I thought about how like the seatbelt is also an innovation. I think sometimes we get stuck in these loops of just being like AI is all evil, or if you don't embrace AI, you're a loser. Whatever it might be, right? Quadbot all over your life. And I think a lot of these loops end up creating more insularity and not enough cross-pollination or coming together to solve problems together. So I'm curious, from someone who's lived many lives and been in rooms where there's a lot of cross-pollination and multi-stakeholder movements happening, how do you encourage people to get out of their own perspectives a little bit and then have some of these problem solving? Because I do think it's going to require a lot of divergent thinking coming together, and being okay with the gray, being okay with not having like, well, you have to just delete everything, go out, go live in a tree, So like, help me out. I would love to hear. I would love to hear your perspective on this.
I love this question. Because it's actually the heart of how we've remade all of our giving at the foundation. So thank you for indulging me and letting me share that. That binary of you're either an innovator or you're a like naysayer is only useful to people who want to innovate in a deeply non-consensual way, right? It's useful. Yeah, it's very useful. And I just want to take that and just kick it. Like, no thanks, we're not going to do that. And so a program that we did all throughout 2025 on the same theme is that we sat down in Hollywood with a number of creatives, whether it was writers or animators or others, and said, okay, in small group settings, is there any version of AI, however you think about it, that would work for you? Any version. Like, is there anything that you can think of that would be helpful to you? And, at first people are like, no, I hate it, put it in the trash. But actually, when you start to talk to people, people have glorious ideas. And they're like, yeah, but it would never happen. I'm like, stop, put that feeling away. What would it look like? Let's think about it. Let's spend a day. Let's tease it out. And what that resulted in after a whole year of doing this work with small groups is that we came up with a report called 8 Rules from Hollywood to Silicon Valley of design principles that were like, build this way, not whatever you're doing. And it's being used in a lot of lobbying and like legislative work and backgrounding in California. We launched a similar initiative just last month in India at the India AI Summit with Bollywood. And the entire point is, can you bring together people who aren't normally seen as like tech innovators and surface their ideas and build accordingly? We just launched, actually the grants are open now if you know artists that are interested, a pooled fund called Artists Make Tech, which is exactly this. Like, if you are a performing artist and you have ideas on the technology you want to build, we'll give you money to do it because you're an innovator. Like that to me, that is the original promise of the internet, was that everyone could be a creator, not just a consumer of technology. And we lost that along the way because it was very lucrative and convenient to make everyone consumers and just a few people creators. And we have to disrupt that. We have a call out right now too, I think it's open for another couple of weeks, called Democracy in AI. And that one was a spicy meatball because people were like, democracy and AI, these things are enemies. Like, no. And we're like, okay, is there any universe in which this technology could be helpful for democratic processes, whether it is deliberation or surfacing of corruption or identifying areas where further investment is needed to support communities to fully participate in society? And like the early applications we're seeing are extraordinary. I actually have been spending all of this time trying to bring in other funders because the ideas are so good. Honestly, all of them should be supported.
Amazing.
And so I really believe like we have the people who are innovating in the way that we need around us everywhere. Like actually everywhere. This is a capital allocation problem and like a support problem to be like, you can do it, we can do this, we can build this. And like we're starting to do the work, we're bringing in a lot of people to do it. And that to me is where just really resisting the binary is where it starts. Like nothing good comes out of that binary.
Thank you. I think I saw another hand. Erin?
I'm going to build off of this around lawmakers because I think one of the frames that is potential for change is that we have, and many of the folks probably in this room in their home countries, have elected a small but mighty different set of players that are actually looking at this issue very differently. And so we're bringing together state lawmakers very quietly to say, like, is AI good at all? And they're like, yes.
Yeah.
But don't tell my environmentalists, my climate activist team, my data center people, because I'm over here like using this thing, trying to intake 5,000 emails and saying like, I don't want a data center in my backyard, right? So I think there's an opportunity to sit in the tension, and there's also a new set of players, particularly in the state legislature in California, right? There's who are not necessarily at the federal level, and so where do you see opportunities politically, as opposed to like it's all bad, all lawmakers are sort of selling out? But I don't think that's I think there's opportunity, and so I'd love to hear where you can see some lawmakers, legislators globally as well, sort of navigating that tension and being able to put something forward that could be replicable in other places.
I love this question. I think you're right. The more local we go, the closer we are to knowing the dimensions of a problem that can be sufficiently either automated or have the right laser-focused intervention to change. The problem comes when everything is sort of at this very abstract level and you have the proliferation of solutions that aren't fit for purpose. But when you actually talk to someone who's like, well, we are trying to, there's a lot of innovation on the intake front. Like we want to do more deliberative and intake from our constituents. And also, if everyone shows up and files a public comment, how do we process it?
Yeah.
Like, how do we make sense out of this? And so where I see a lot of opportunity, and California is a great state, Mozilla is a partner with the Responsible Innovation Center in California doing this work with Governor Gavin Newsom, where we see a lot is in knowledge synthesis. Like, just how do you make sense of all of the inputs that are coming in order to prioritize? We're also seeing quite a lot, and California, again, is great at this, but I would say India has been fantastic on this front. Languages, right? And we have a front row seat to that because of the data set that we have, but really making sure that your public services are available to people no matter what language they speak is incredible. A lot of innovation also happening around accessibility, using AI to turn a heavy synthesized document into something that's like a little easier to read, or text to voice in your particular language, or at a different reading level. That is, if a human had to do it, it's a lot of muscle, right? Like that takes a lot of time, and it ends up falling lower and lower on the priority chart and then it doesn't get done, and who do you fail to serve in that time? AI's ability to translate like what government services are available to people wherever they happen to be is where we're sort of seeing the most work. And India has a lot to learn on, or a lot to offer others, a lot to learn from in that regard.
Yeah, Mary.
Sure. No, and thank you so much. This is so timely and so necessary. Both of you are such leaders in the space. My question builds a little bit on the subnational, sort of the layer below the federal government, having worked at the State Department in rights respecting AI and watching the entire team focused on that be purged, and then you see in the debates with Anthropic right now around safety, right? I'd be curious, your thoughts on that, the case in the debate that's sparking, but also, are there best practices, even at the sort of micro, at the mayoral level, of how to take something like GDPR or these privacy kind of rules that are, as you said, it's a bit abstract, but it's working. But is there something that's that you're seeing that are working well, that could be scalable, not just in the U.S. The U.S. probably doesn't have as many examples because we haven't been the leaders in trust and safety. Well, Mozilla is and Perth is, but I'm talking about the regulatory level. Like, what's working that could be imported, or could you see like almost a C40 for AI developing with mayors?
Absolutely. I think where you see the most useful innovation is the more specific to use case that it gets. And a great example is actually South Korea decided that they would approach AI development focused on medical devices, right? They were like, that's where we think this is useful. That's where we see the most societal benefit. And so what we're going to do is we are going to set up a regulatory regime where companies are innovating in using AI for medical devices, but they're going to check in with regulators frequently on what they're doing. So there's an entire reporting regime that's related to that. It's not you wait years and years and years and years, we give you approval, and then you can go. It's like, you're build with the technology, but check in with us. And then check in, and what that does is it's also upskilling the regulators, right? Because they're now on the frontier of possibility. And the innovators don't feel like they have to like stop pencils down until all the rules are ironed out, which is not really feasible when technology moves at a quick pace, right, where it feels competitive. And so even just thinking about the regulatory model as iterative and collaborative is so interesting, and that wouldn't be really manageable if you were trying to talk about general purpose AI, but because they were like, it is this one industry, we know who the players are, we know what the impacts are, it's all of a sudden, that's a bite you can chew, right? It's something you can take on. Even something like in New York City, right? In New York, algorithmic pricing for apps, right? Where you're like, why is my spaghetti now costing $18? It wasn't like this yesterday, what's going on? Requiring the disclosure at point of sale is a really interesting targeted intervention that I think not only introduces transparency, but does it in a way that enhances public awareness of like, wait a minute, there's dynamic pricing on DoorDash? Where else is there dynamic pricing? Yeah. What is dynamic pricing? Wait a minute, I don't like this. I want to talk to somebody. And so, exactly, who's responsible? Let's get in there. And the more tangible the intervention, the clearer the remedy can be as well. And so I think in the last couple of years, when we've been talking about rights respecting AI, again, it's at a level of abstraction that introduces fear and then deference to the like really smart people in Silicon Valley who know all the details. And that is something that, again, it serves someone, but that someone's not you. And so let's interrogate that and get more specific.
Yeah. Last question? I think there was Charlotte? Yeah. No, Charlotte.
Okay. There's been a lot of talk about labor displacement, and a lot of analysts are worried that this disruption cycle is not going to lead to new jobs or a new framework for labor or the workforce. It's just going to be a permanent reduction. Are folks worried about perhaps a massive cultural backlash to that and how it might affect safety programs and really all the good benefits of AI? People just look at AI and say, well, I don't have a job now. Why should I invest in this company or use their services or whatnot?
Yeah, it's a huge problem, and that's why it's so perplexing to me that more of the hyperscalers aren't focused on that as like a core backlash question. The position that we are exploring at Mozilla is one of like, it's not obvious that because you automate a lot of things that people should lose their jobs as a result. It's actually not, and it doesn't necessarily logically follow that just because you're more efficient, you need to have fewer people. You could also decide to have a 4-day work week. You could also decide, as Google once did, to give people 20% of their time for innovation time. I was just talking to a small law firm that said, hey, so we started using AI to automate quite a lot of our work, realized that we don't really need 2 full-time associates. So we still pay them full-time, but half of their work is pro bono. And I was like, oh, wow. And she's like, yeah, so what that's done is now we have access to a far more competitive talent pool that we ever had before, because there are people who are like, wait, I get to be paid the same salary. Half of my work is mission oriented. And so there were no layoffs that happened as a result of that. It actually just changed the nature of work. What you need is companies to have courage to do that. Right? You need companies to say, actually, that is useful. And for public companies that think that they have an obligation to shareholders that is only profit maximizing, to introduce the logic of like profit on what time horizon? If you obliterate all of the consumers of your goods because no one has money in the future that you are driving towards, is that actually maximizing your profit in the long term? Maybe, maybe not. And these are the types of conversations that we need to have that require both courage and creativity on a time horizon that's not quarterly. And part of the problem is that we're stuck in this doom loop of talking about what's possible on the short term and not really envisioning the long term, which is the heart of what you're presenting, right? Like, there are medium term and long term real disruptions that are possible, but they're not inevitable. Like, we can do something about them and think about this really differently. I would also just say, I mean, for a lot of the folks who are saying like, oh, AI is going to disrupt all jobs and we can't do it, I'm like, have you tried to give all of your work to an AI agent? I mean, just in the last, we're not there yet. And I think there is an argument for like job reconfiguration. For example, like Amazon is grappling with this right now, right? Like, there have been massive disruptions to AWS in the last week because of AI generated code. And now there's like, wait, who's going back through that code to make sure that it's actually good? Turns out now you need a human engineer babysitter to like be like, oh, it's quality control, right? I think we should still interrogate whether we want humans to be in the like quality control seat versus the creative seat. Like, we don't have time for all my thoughts on that. But I just want to resist the inevitability that people show up to in this conversation with like, what's the workforce you want to design instead?
Yeah.
And we can.
Yeah.
Where are you on the spectrum of corporate America having that courage? Speak up.
Yeah. I think there are some more leaders than we realize, but they're not all leaders. Like, it's going to require, I think, groundswell of real demand. Like, we're not going to get there easily. People aren't going to wake up and be like, I had a good night's sleep. I'm going to be egalitarian now. But I think these conversations are happening in boardrooms in ways that I actually find shockingly more sophisticated than I would think. It's happening with groups of activist investors. That's really fascinating. Like, it's on the radar. And when there are moments like, I think last week before, Jack Dorsey saying we're laying off 4,000 people, and by the way, this is going to happen to everyone else in 6 months.
No.
You see people sitting up being like, wait, really?
No.
That's the time horizon? And so there is a little bit of self-interested, wait, what are we doing about this? That's starting to happen. But like with any big challenging thing, you need some first movers. You need some people to have courage. And then I do think it's possible, but it's not going to be everyone all at once.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we heard when the internet first really took hold, right? That it was going to eliminate people's jobs, and if anything, it actually created far more opportunity, wealth, everything.
ATMs, they were like, ATMs are going to destroy the job of bank tellers.
Yeah.
There are now more bank tellers than there have ever been in history. So,
would love to leave us on a note of action. So, given all the work that there is to do, what is one thing that all of us here, the folks in this room, whether you're an activist, a funder, a policymaker, a technologist, or just a concerned citizen, what is one thing that you wish every person could or would do?
So when we talk about digital rights going full circle, I would say you have a right to know and you have a right to participate, right? And so I think my advice is on both of those frontiers. Like, I want you to know, I want you to learn, I want you to stay informed, however that works for you. For some people, that's reading and listening to people's experiences. For others, it's playing with the technology itself to understand like what's possible. And on participation, really, like, you have so many more zones of agency than you realize. Like, if you work in an organization that's like, we're gonna just integrate ChatGPT into everything. Even the act of just asking a question of like, really? How are you ensuring that our data is protected? How are you making sure that this doesn't cause cognitive offloading that harms the talent pool of our organization? Like, the act of just asking the questions, I think, is what is the unlock for the courage that we need to lead through this moment. And it sounds small, but it's not. If everyone is doing that, and I think it will lead to the kind of change we need.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much, Nabiha.
Thank
You've given us
you.
so much to think about.
Thank you so much. This is really wonderful. Thank you, everybody.
I want to leave us on another note of action, and for that, I would love to invite my colleague, Kalia.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming today. It was so nice to see some familiar faces and also to meet so many of you. Thank you also to our host, Veronica Beard. This was such a lovely space for an event instead of like a conference.
Yeah.
Great.
So nice.
Yeah. Thank you to our speakers, Nabiha and Sherry. Thank you so much for being here today. So just for those of you who are just learning about Perth.org, even if you aren't currently experiencing online threats, we encourage you all to go online and create an account at Perth.org and follow the prevention and protection steps that are outlined right when you log in and create your account. And we hope that you never need our help beyond that, but if you do, we're here to help you if you're ever experiencing any kind of online harms. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and thanks again for coming. Be sure to shop around and mingle a little bit before heading out. And also, if I missed you at check-in, feel free to grab me so I can check you in.
Thank you, Kaylee. And just to leave us on one final note, I promise it's going to go down, but I'll bring it back up. There's one thing that stuck with me since we started building Perth, and it is that, unfortunately, it doesn't matter whether you're a famous figure or a totally private citizen. We are all susceptible to online harms, online threats and harms in some way, because there's a complete lack of guardrails. And that has allowed online violence in all its many forms to become a global epidemic that none of us has immunity to. And that global epidemic is silencing voices, it's suppressing democracy, it's robbing us of our sense of security and our mental health. And in some cases, like in image-based abuse incidents, it's robbing people of their very intimate dignities. And we can't let that become the norm. So we've talked a lot about imagination and building a better future, and I firmly believe that with rooms like this and with leaders like Nabiha, we can take that imagination and turn it into our reality. So thank you so much. This is a conversation to continue. Thank you for being here. And with that, we will actually close. Thank you.
That was so fun. Thank you.